So there's been some updates around the California Cannabis Excise tax calculation, specifically on the markup percentage, as well as the discounted versus undiscounted cost basis. There's also been an update in the filing frequency. So if you're a micro biz or a distributor, it's very important that you watch this video and understand how your calculation changes, as well as the frequency of your filings. And if you're a retailer, it's very important to know the changes because you'll actually understand, are you being overcharged by your distributor for the excise tax? If you have any questions about cannabis excise tax or cannabis accounting, then please reach out to Green Growth CPAs via our website at greengrowthcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Let's hop right into the presentation. So at the beginning of this year, there have been some changes in how California is calculating the excise tax for cannabis distributors, as well as the frequency of the payments. So in this video, we're going to discuss the updates for 2020 for the cannabis excise tax payments in the state of California. And this presentation is brought to you by Green Growth CPAs. Now, before we get started, I need to let you know that the information contained in this presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general. So in this video, here's what we're going to cover. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit of background on the cannabis excise tax. Then we'll talk about the 2020 updates. Then I'll walk you through an example so you can see exactly how this will change the calculations, as well as give you some tips for the distributors out there, as well as some tips for the retailers. So a little bit of background on the California Cannabis Excise Tax. Now, the Cannabis Excise Tax is defined and priced at 15% of the average market price of any specific cannabis product. And the average market price is determined by the type of transaction between you and the seller, or the wholesaler of that product. Now, there are two types of transactions. First, you have an arm's length transaction, and that's a transaction between two informed and willing parties, pretty much separate entities that don't have any mingling of management and things of that nature. Now, the base that the retailer calculates the excise tax on must reflect the fair market value of the cannabis or cannabis products in the open market. Now, in practice, this means your wholesale cost plus a markup. Now, let's break apart those two pieces, the wholesale cost and the markup. So first, that wholesale cost. This is determined by the amount that you pay for a cannabis product to a distributor plus any transportation costs and before any discounts or trade allowances. Now, this before discounts is going to come in later in the update. So just understand this was defined as before discounts and trade allowances. Now, for instance, a cannabis product that, say, you purchased for $150 at wholesale and then shipped adds an additional $25 onto that wholesale cost, the final wholesale cost is $175. All right, so that's your wholesale cost. Now, the markup. As of January 1st, 2018, when the market opened up for recreational, the standard markup rate was 60% for cannabis and cannabis products. So that $175 wholesale product is now valued at $280 at the retail level with that markup, and the excise tax collected would be 15% of that $280, which brings it to $42 in excise tax. Now, the second type of transaction is a non-arm's length transaction, and this is a transaction where the average market price is defined as the retailer's total gross receipts from the retail sale. Now, if your business operates as both a distributor and a retailer or fully vertically integrated, then you're likely using a non-arm's length transaction to sell your goods. And this is a minority of the market. Most people are doing these arm's length transactions by buying their products from a distributor that is not themselves. So now let's hop into what the updates are for 2020. So before January 1st, 2020, distributors had to calculate and collect cannabis excise tax on that undiscounted price. So if during an arm's length transaction, you as a cannabis distributor sold someone a cannabis product for $10, but you gave them a discount so that it's $8 to them, you still needed to calculate your excise tax markup on that $10, which is the undiscounted price. And also, the cannabis excise tax was paid quarterly, and that standard markup that you actually did the markup on that undiscounted price was 60% of the wholesale price. Now, the changes from the CDTFA state that as of January 1st, 2020, you can calculate your excise tax markup off that discounted $8 price from that example above. And additionally, the payments for cannabis excise tax now need to be remitted monthly and not quarterly. And lastly, that standard markup is now 80% of the wholesale price. So what does this actually mean in practice? So for distributors, you're going to need to pay pay that excise tax more frequently, and the basis to calculate that cannabis excise tax can be lowered, but the markup on that basis has increased. So it's a slightly different calculation for you as a cannabis distributor, and you're still in charge of collecting this excise tax. No changes in that. But to calculate that cannabis excise tax that you must collect from cannabis retailers, you typically mark up your wholesale price by 80% and then multiply that by the 15% for the excise tax. Or if you want to go a faster calculation, you can just take your wholesale price and multiply it by 27%. That's 1.8 times 15%. Just a little faster calculation, one step there. And again, this wholesale price that you're marking up can be the discounted price, which could come in helpful. So let's look at an example of how this actually shakes out with some real numbers here. So here's an arm's length transaction example. So on the left side, the first column, you're going to see all the different things we're going to talk about. Undiscounted wholesale price, discounted wholesale price, markup, calculation, excise tax basis, the excise tax rate, the tax to be collected, and the payment frequency. So for pre-2020, before January 1st, 2020, so say for a product, the undiscounted wholesale price is $55, but you're selling to somebody at a discount, and that discounted price would be $45. Now, the markup pre-2020 was 60% of that wholesale price, the undiscounted wholesale price. So the calculation for the cannabis markup is going to be $55 times 160%, right? The 100 is the actual price, and then the 60% is that markup, right? So 1.6 times 55. So your excise tax basis is $88. That's that fair market value at a retail level. That's what that's defined as. And then the excise tax rate, 15%. So 15% of $88 is $13.20. Now you needed to pay this excise tax quarterly, so 4 times per year. So that's how things shook out pre-2020. Now let's look at the new example and the new way of how cannabis excise tax is calculated and collected. Now in 2020, same price here. I'm going to only change what is actually changing in 2020. So same price of wholesale, $55, same discounted price as $45, but then you see that the markup has gone from 60 to 80%. So let's look at that calculation now. You can use that discounted price in your calculation. So you got that $45 times 180% or 1.8. Then that excise tax basis is now $81. So you see that the basis for the excise tax went down because we were allowed to use that discounted wholesale price in the calculation. Now the excise tax rate stays the same at 15%, and the tax to be collected is going to be 15% of that $81, which is $12.15. Now lastly, that payment frequency is monthly, so 12 times per year you need to submit this payment over to the CDTFA. Now, when you look at this, the tax to be collected is about $1.05 less. This is just, $55. That could be just one product. But when you're shipping thousands of products every week or every month, this could be thousands of dollars in excise tax that you could save for your retailers if you're actually calculating this properly and using that discounted wholesale price. So on the screen, you're going to see again what has actually changed. It's highlighted in red here. You have the markup rate, which went from 60 to 80%. The calculation can use that discounted wholesale price, and the payment frequency is monthly compared to quarterly. Now, some quick tips for cannabis distributors. So as a distributor, this really has no material effect on your business operation aside from making sure that your calculations are correct and that you're paying the excise tax on time. Now, you're still responsible for collecting and remitting this cannabis excise tax to the state authorities. But again, the caveat, however, is that you'll need to change your calculation. So if you continue to calculate your cannabis excise tax by using the undiscounted price, then you could compromise customer relationships, especially with those big accounts when you're moving a lot of units. Yes, $1 is not a big amount on one unit, but again, when you're moving thousands of units at a time, that can add up over time. And potentially this could result in thousands of dollars in over-collected taxes. Now, the state authorities are not going to let you know that you're over-collecting taxes and paying more than necessary. So if you filed and paid excise tax for any previous months, for right now, we're doing this video in March, so if it's January or February you're looking at and you overpaid, and you've already calculated using that undiscounted price, then there's probably not much you can do. The state has already taken custody of that money, and our team does not foresee them giving any returns to distributors for not calculating and using this new discounted price calculation. Now, the downside to this mistake is that distributors may be on the hook if a dispensary wants their money back, and this is only if you want to keep that account, that retail account. because as a distributor, you could be held responsible for eating that cost of the additional tax that you collected, which is a big problem for new operators and even the longtime distributors, because as you may know, the margins for cannabis distributors are razor thin. But again, this is only if you want to keep that retail account and solidify a long-term relationship. But if you haven't paid that excise tax yet, then work with your internal accounting team or your cannabis CPA to calculate the excess tax that was collected and then refund that to your client. Now, what we believe is the more important change here that you really need to pay attention to is the change in reporting frequency. And what that means is that cannabis distributors have more opportunities to be late on their excise tax payments. Now, as you may know, those penalties for being late start at 50% of the excise tax due. And if you're collecting $100,000 or $200,000 in cannabis excise tax, 50% is a lot of money. And there is no official abatement program for that. So you really need to stay on top of this. And with those razor thin margins, you cannot afford to be late. So make sure that you have a tax calendar with reminders to have your excise tax payments submitted on time with the right amount. And if you need help with that, you can reach out to one of our CPAs at greengrowcpas.com and we can help you make sure that you're submitting on time and accurately. Now, some tips for dispensaries and delivery businesses. So as a cannabis retailer, I want you to look back at your January and February 2020 balance sheets, or even other months if you're watching this well into 2020, and check your excise tax payments and the calculations to see if you've been overcharged by your distributor. Now, if you've been overcharged, you may want to increase your prices to offset that excise tax expense in the short term, but this depends on if you've actually sold that inventory, or even new inventory could help cover and offset this additional tax. But increasing prices is always tricky, and it's a dangerous tactic, especially when your regulars start to notice, especially when it's going to be only for a limited amount of time. You don't want to deteriorate that client relationship, that customer relationship, by randomly increasing prices. But if you really need to do it, consider it, or get a financial analysis from your internal accounting team or from a CPA to say, all right, you need to offset it by this much money over this period of time. But for all retailers, be sure to reach out to your distributor immediately to make them aware of this update in the excise tax calculation of being able to use that discounted price so that you don't lose any business from having to charge higher prices to offset a miscalculated excise tax payment. A simple, quick text message or email over to your distributor could be very helpful for both of your businesses. Now, hopefully this video has brought you some value and helped you to understand what those updates are for 2020 on the excise tax calculation and payment frequency. And if you need help with your cannabis business accounting or taxes, please reach out to Green Grow CPAs via our website at greengrowcpas.com or give us a call at 800-674-9050. We can help walk through your books, see if you've been overcollecting on taxes or see if you've been overcharged on taxes for your excise tax payments, and then we can help you develop a plan as well as any other accounting or tax needs for your cannabis business. So if you need help with anything taxes or accounting related to your cannabis business, please reach out to Green Grow CPAs via our website at greengrowcpas.com. Click that Get Started button on the top right corner or give us a call at 800-674-9050. Have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.